In the heart of New York City, where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and dreams were both born and crushed daily, there lived a young woman named Alexandra Carter. She was the only daughter of Marcus Carter, one of the most successful black CEOs in the country. Marcus had built his tech empire from scratch, turning a small startup into a global powerhouse known for its cutting-edge innovations and inclusive workplace culture. Despite her privileged upbringing, Alexandra often felt like an outsider in her own world. She grew up attending elite schools, wearing designer clothes, and traveling to exotic destinations during vacations. Yet, something about her life always felt hollow. Alexandra wasn't your typical rich kid who threw extravagant parties or flaunted her wealth on social media. Instead, she spent most of her time observing people, their actions, their words, and the subtle ways they interacted with each other. Her curiosity stemmed from years of listening to her father's stories about climbing the corporate ladder as a black man in America. He often spoke about the challenges he faced, the biases he encountered, and how hard he worked to earn respect in an industry dominated by white men. These conversations left a deep impression on Alexandra, shaping her worldview and making her hyper-aware of inequality. As she grew older, Alexandra began working part-time at her father's company, Carter Tech. It was a sprawling office complex filled with hundreds of employees buzzing around like bees in a hive. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. The company prided itself on diversity, offering equal opportunities to people of all races, genders, and backgrounds. Employees smiled politely, exchanged pleasantries in hallways, and attended team-building workshops designed to foster unity. But beneath this polished exterior, Alexandra sensed cracks in the foundation. Something didn't feel right. Her suspicions deepened one evening when she overheard a group of junior employees gossiping near the coffee machine. They were talking about a senior manager who had publicly humiliated an intern earlier that day. According to them, the manager snapped at the intern for asking too many questions during a presentation, calling him inept in front of the entire team. What bothered Alexandra more than the story itself was the casual tone in which it was told. It was clear that such behavior wasn't unusual. It was almost expected. Determined to understand what was really happening within the company, Alexandra decided to dig deeper. She started paying closer attention to how employees treated each other, especially those in lower-ranking positions like receptionists, cafeteria workers, and janitors. One afternoon, while waiting for her father in his office, she noticed a delivery man struggling to carry heavy boxes through the lobby. Several employees walked past him without offering help, some even rolling their eyes as if annoyed by his presence. When Alexandra approached him and offered assistance, he thanked her warmly but admitted he was used to being ignored. This incident stayed with Alexandra long after the delivery man left. She couldn't shake off the feeling that despite her father's best efforts to create a fair and respectful workplace, there was still a divide between the important people and everyone else. The thought troubled her deeply. Was Carter Tech truly as inclusive as it claimed to be? Or was it just another corporation putting on a show for public approval? One evening, while having dinner with her father, Alexandra brought up her concerns. "Dad," she said hesitantly, "do you think our employees respect you because of who you are, or because of what you can do for them?" Marcus paused mid-bite, his fork hovering above his plate. After a moment of silence, he chuckled softly. "That's a tough question, Lexi," he replied. "I'd like to believe it's the former, but honestly, I can't say for sure. People act differently when they think no one's watching." His answer lingered in Alexandra's mind long after the meal ended. If her father couldn't tell whether his employees genuinely respected him or simply feared losing their jobs, then who could? Suddenly, inspiration struck her. She remembered a movie she'd watched recently, where a wealthy businessman went undercover as a factory worker to expose corruption within his company. At first, the idea seemed absurd. She was hardly cut out for manual labor. But the more she thought about it, the more intrigued she became. What if she could go undercover? Herself? Not as a high-powered executive, but as someone completely invisible. A cleaner, perhaps. No one would suspect a janitor of being the CEO's daughter. She could observe firsthand how employees behaved when they thought no one important was around. It was risky, yes, but also exciting. For the first time in months, Alexandra felt a spark of purpose ignite within her. The next morning, she began planning her transformation. First, she needed to look different. With the help of a professional makeup artist recommended by a friend, Alexandra dyed her jet black hair a dull shade of brown and styled it into loose waves that framed her face. She picked out thick-rimmed glasses with plain lenses, deliberately, choosing frames that made her appear older and less glamorous. Her wardrobe underwent a similar makeover. Gone were the tailored blazers and designer dresses. Instead, she opted for baggy jeans, oversized sweaters, and sturdy sneakers. By the end of the process, even her reflection in the mirror barely resembled the confident young woman she usually saw staring back at her. With her new appearance complete, Alexandra crafted a fake resume under the name Tasha Johnson. Tasha was a single mother in her early 30s, struggling to make ends meet after losing her previous job due to budget cuts. Desperate for steady income, she applied for a temporary cleaning position at Carter Tech through a third-party staffing agency. To avoid suspicion, Alexandra avoided mentioning any connections to the company and provided references from fictional acquaintances. A few days later, she received a call confirming her employment. Her heart raced as she accepted the offer, knowing that this marked the beginning of an adventure unlike anything she'd ever experienced. On her first night as Tasha, Alexandra arrived at the Carter Tech headquarters dressed in her disguise. As she stepped inside the dimly lit building, clutching a mop bucket and cleaning supplies, she felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Would anyone recognize her? Could she pull this off without blowing her cover? For the next several hours, Alexandra worked alongside other cleaners, scrubbing floors, emptying trash bins, and sanitizing bathrooms. Though physically demanding, the work gave her a unique perspective on the inner workings of the company. She observed late-night employees rushing to finish projects, oblivious to the silent figures tidying up around them. Some greeted her kindly, thanking her for keeping the workspace clean, while others barely acknowledged her existence. Each interaction added another piece to the puzzle she was trying to solve. By the end of her shift, Alexandra's muscles ached, and her hands were raw from handling harsh chemicals. But despite the exhaustion, she felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. For the first time, she understood what it meant to be invisible, and yet, paradoxically, to see everything clearly. This was just the beginning of her journey, and already she knew it would change her forever. Alexandra's first week as Tasha Johnson was a whirlwind of new experiences, emotions, and revelations. Each night, she reported to the Carter Tech building at 10 p.m. sharp, blending seamlessly with the small team of cleaners who worked tirelessly to keep the sprawling office complex spotless. At first, her coworkers didn't pay much attention to her. They assumed she was just another temporary hire trying to make ends meet, a faceless figure in scrubs and gloves destined to fade into the background. But Alexandra quickly learned that being invisible came with its own set of challenges. The physical demands of the job were far greater than she had anticipated. Scrubbing stubborn coffee stains off conference room tables, mopping sticky floors littered with crumbs, and hauling heavy bags of trash down long hallways left her body aching by the end of each shift. Her hands grew rough from constant exposure to cleaning chemicals, and blisters formed on her palms despite wearing gloves. For someone accustomed to desk work and air-conditioned offices, this was an entirely foreign world, one that required grit, patience, and resilience. Despite the physical toll, Alexandra found herself fascinated by the rhythm of the cleaning crew's nightly routine. There was a quiet camaraderie among them, forged through shared struggles and mutual respect. Most of the cleaners were immigrants or single parents working multiple jobs to support their families. One woman, Maria, often spoke fondly of her 2 young daughters back home in Mexico, while another man named Raj joked about his teenage son refusing to take advice seriously. These snippets of conversation humanized people Alexandra might otherwise have overlooked if she hadn't been standing shoulder to shoulder with them, wiping down the same countertops and emptying the same waste baskets. But it wasn't all camaraderie and lighthearted banter. As Alexandra settled into her role, she began noticing stark differences in how employees treated the cleaning staff versus their peers. Some showed genuine kindness, offering warm smiles, holding doors open, or even striking up brief conversations. A junior graphic designer named Jamal once stopped to thank Alexandra for tidying up his workspace after hours, telling her he appreciated how hard she worked. He admitted he'd been stressed lately juggling deadlines and family responsibilities, but talking to her made him feel less alone. Moments like these reminded Alexandra that empathy existed within the company walls, even if it wasn't always visible. On the flip side, however, there were plenty of moments that left Alexandra seething, with frustration or worse, heartbroken. Late one evening, while dusting desks in the marketing department, she overheard two mid-level managers laughing loudly about how easy it must be to clean toilets for a living. "It's not like they need brains to do this stuff," one of them sneered, gesturing dismissively toward the hallway where Alexandra stood frozen, pretending not to hear. Another time, a senior executive walked past her without so much as a glance, dropping a half-eaten sandwich wrapper directly onto the freshly mopped floor. When Alexandra politely asked him to pick it up, he rolled his eyes and muttered something under his breath before walking away. These incidents weren't isolated. They became a pattern. Over the course of her second week undercover, Alexandra encountered countless examples of blatant disrespect and casual cruelty. Employees would leave food wrappers strewn across desks, spill drinks without bothering to clean them up, or ignore basic courtesies like saying, "Thank you." What struck her most was how entitled some of them acted, as though the cleaners' sole purpose was to cater to their messes, no matter how careless or deliberate those messes might be. One particularly memorable encounter occurred when Alexandra was tasked with cleaning the executive suite. It was a sleek, modern space filled with glass walls, plush leather chairs, and state-of-the-art technology. As she vacuumed near the corner office, she couldn't help but notice a group of three high-ranking executives huddled together, deep in conversation. Their voices carried clearly through the thin partition separating them from the hallway. "I don't get why Marcus insists on hiring so many minorities," one of them said, shaking his head. "It's not like diversity actually improves performance." "Yeah, we're just pandering to political correctness," another chimed in. "If I had my way, I'd focus on skills, not skin color." The third man laughed bitterly. "Skills? Please, half these people couldn't find their way out of a paper bag. We're doing them a favor by letting them tag along." Alexandra felt her stomach churn as she listened. She wanted to storm into the room, confront them, and demand answers, but she knew she couldn't blow her cover. Instead, she forced herself to remain calm, quietly finishing her tasks while memorizing every word they said. The anger simmered inside her like a pot about to boil over, but she channeled it into determination. These were the kinds of attitudes she needed to expose, not just for herself, but for everyone who deserved better. Amidst the negativity, there were also moments of unexpected connection that gave Alexandra hope. On her third night, she met a young intern named Priya during a late-night sweep of the engineering wing. Priya was hunched over her laptop, typing furiously, when Alexandra approached to clean the area around her desk. Instead of ignoring her or shooing her away, Priya looked up with a tired smile and said, "Hey, Tasha, how's your shift going?" Caught off guard by the warmth in her voice, Alexandra hesitated before responding. "It's okay," she said softly. "Just keeping busy." Priya nodded sympathetically. "I know what that's like. Sometimes it feels like there aren't enough hours in the day, you know?" She paused, then added, "By the way, thanks for cleaning up here. I try to keep my space tidy, but things get messy fast when you're coding nonstop." For the next few minutes, they chatted casually about work-life balance, stress management, and the challenges of navigating corporate culture as a newcomer. Priya confessed that she sometimes felt intimidated by the more experienced engineers, especially when they dismissed her ideas without giving them proper consideration. Listening to her, Alexandra realized how much pressure interns face to prove themselves, and how easy it was for talented individuals to slip through the cracks if no one bothered to mentor or support them. As the days turned into weeks, Alexandra continued gathering evidence of both good and bad behavior. She kept a mental catalog of names, incidents, and patterns, carefully noting which employees went out of their way to treat others with dignity and which ones displayed toxic habits. Occasionally, she'd jot down quick notes in a small notebook, disguised as a cleaning checklist, ensuring she wouldn't forget key details later. Her observations extended beyond individual interactions to broader systemic issues. For instance, she noticed that certain departments seemed to prioritize efficiency over inclusivity. In the finance division, for example, employees rarely acknowledged the cleaning staff, treating them as little more than moving furniture. Meanwhile, in the creative department, designers frequently collaborated with lower-level workers, seeking input on projects and crediting them publicly during presentations. These contrasts highlighted the importance of leadership tone. If managers modeled respectful behavior, their teams followed suit. If they didn't, chaos ensued. By the end of her second week, Alexandra had developed a clearer understanding of the dynamics at play within Carter Tech. While some employees embodied the values her father had worked so hard to instill, respect, integrity, and collaboration, others blatantly disregarded them, perpetuating cycles of inequality and bias. The disparity between these two groups was staggering, and it reinforced her belief that meaningful change required more than superficial initiatives or empty promises. Still, Alexandra knew she couldn't rely solely on anecdotal evidence. To truly hold people accountable, she needed concrete proof of wrongdoing. So she started paying closer attention to unguarded moments, conversations overheard in break rooms, emails left open on unlocked computers, and discarded documents tossed carelessly into recycling bins. Every scrap of information mattered, no matter how insignificant it seemed at first glance. One fateful evening, while cleaning a conference room adjacent to the executive offices, Alexandra stumbled upon a goldmine. Someone had accidentally left a laptop logged into their email account, its screen glowing brightly against the darkened room. Curiosity got the better of her, and she glanced at the open messages displayed on the screen. What she discovered made her blood run cold. The emails revealed a coordinated effort by several top executives to undermine Marcus Carter's diversity initiatives. One message detailed plans to delay implementation of mandatory sensitivity training sessions until after quarterly reviews, claiming it would avoid unnecessary distractions. Another mocked Marcus's commitment to hiring underrepresented candidates, calling it a waste of resources. Worst of all, one email explicitly referred to Alexandra's father as too soft and suggested replacing him with someone willing to take a firmer stance. Shocked and furious, Alexandra snapped a few discreet photos of the screen using her phone before closing the laptop and reporting the incident to IT under the guise of finding it unattended. Technically, she hadn't done anything wrong. She was simply following protocol. But guilt gnawed at her nonetheless. Was it ethical to spy on her colleagues even if their actions warranted exposure? Could she? As Alexandra's third week undercover began, she felt a growing sense of urgency. The revelations from the previous weeks had painted a troubling picture of Carter Tech, an organization that prided itself on inclusivity and fairness, but harbored pockets of toxicity and hypocrisy beneath its polished surface. What started as a personal experiment to test her father's employees had evolved into something far more significant: a mission to uncover the truth and hold people accountable for their actions. Each night brought new challenges, fresh insights, and mounting evidence that would eventually shape the future of the company. One evening, while cleaning the HR department's offices, Alexandra stumbled upon another startling discovery. A stack of anonymous feedback forms sat carelessly on a desk, waiting to be filed away. Curious, she flipped through them, careful not to disturb their order. Most were mundane complaints about office supplies or temperature control, but a few stood out. One employee described feeling constantly belittled by a supervisor who mocked their accent during team meetings. Another recounted being excluded from important projects because they were too junior, despite having qualifications equal to or better than their peers. Yet another expressed frustration over the lack of promotions for women of color, claiming it was impossible to climb the ladder without connections. What struck Alexandra most was how these voices seemed to vanish into thin air once submitted. There was no indication that anyone in leadership took these concerns seriously, or even acknowledged them at all. It was as if the system designed to protect employees had become yet another tool for silencing dissent. This realization weighed heavily on her. If employees couldn't trust the very mechanisms meant to safeguard their rights, what hope did they have? Later that same night, Alexandra found herself mopping the floor near the IT department when she overheard a heated argument between two engineers. One, a middle-aged white man named Greg, was berating his younger colleague, Aisha, for missing a deadline. "You're always late with your work," he snapped, his voice echoing down the hallway. "Maybe you should stick to simpler tasks instead of trying to handle big projects." Aisha, visibly shaken, tried to defend herself. "I've been juggling 3 assignments at once, Greg. I told you I needed help, but no one stepped up." Greg scoffed. "Excuses, excuses. You know what this looks like? Like you can't handle the pressure. Maybe engineering isn't the right field for you." The comment hit Aisha like a punch to the gut. She gathered her things silently and hurried out of the room, avoiding eye contact with anyone, including Alexandra, who stood frozen nearby. Though tempted to intervene, Alexandra reminded herself that she was Tasha, an invisible cleaner whose presence shouldn't draw attention. Instead, she focused on memorizing every detail of the exchange, vowing to document it later. These moments of injustice weren't isolated incidents. They formed a pattern that Alexandra couldn't ignore. Over time, she noticed how certain behaviors thrived in specific environments. In departments where managers led by example, treating everyone with respect regardless of rank or background, employees followed suit, creating a culture of mutual support. But in areas dominated by toxic leaders, negativity spread like wildfire, infecting even those who might otherwise act kindly. For instance, the marketing team stood out as a particularly hostile environment. Led by a senior director named Rachel, the department operated under a cutthroat mentality where competition overshadowed collaboration. Employees whispered behind each other's backs, sabotaged colleagues' presentations, and hoarded resources to gain favor with management. When Alexandra cleaned their workspace, she often found passive-aggressive notes left on desks, "Nice job ruining my campaign idea," or half-empty coffee cups deliberately placed on coworkers' keyboards. It was a stark contrast to the camaraderie she observed in the design team, where members openly shared ideas and celebrated each other's successes. Despite witnessing such glaring disparities, Alexandra also encountered glimmers of hope. Late one night, while tidying up the cafeteria, she overheard a heartfelt conversation between 2 junior employees, a young black man named Marcus, no relation to her father, and a Latina woman named Sophia. They were discussing their struggles to balance ambition with authenticity in a predominantly white workplace. "I just hate feeling like I have to change who I am to fit in," Marcus admitted, running a hand through his hair. "It's exhausting." Sophia nodded sympathetically. "I get that. People assume I got hired because of affirmative action, not because I'm qualified. But honestly, I don't care what they think anymore. My work speaks for itself." Their words resonated deeply with Alexandra. Here were 2 individuals refusing to let prejudice define them, choosing instead to rise above it with grace and determination. Moments like these reminded her why she'd embarked on this journey in the first place, to ensure that hardworking, talented people like Marcus and Sophia weren't held back by systemic barriers or prejudiced attitudes. As her shifts continued, Alexandra became increasingly adept at navigating the delicate balance between observation and invisibility. She learned to read body language, interpret tone, and pick up on subtle cues that revealed someone's true character. For example, she noticed how some employees went out of their way to greet the cleaning staff warmly, even remembering their names and asking about their day. Others treated them as though they didn't exist, stepping over spilled water without apologizing or leaving trash strewn across tables without a second thought. These distinctions mattered, not just morally, but practically. Employees who showed kindness and empathy tended to foster positive relationships across departments, breaking down silos and encouraging teamwork. Those who acted dismissively or rudely created divisions, breeding resentment and stifling productivity. By documenting these patterns, Alexandra hoped to provide her father with actionable insights into which leaders truly embodied the company's values and which ones needed to go. Still, gathering evidence wasn't always straightforward. Some truths hid in plain sight, while others required digging deeper. On one occasion, Alexandra discovered a forgotten USB drive wedged under a chair in a conference room. Containing sensitive files detailing budget allocations and performance reviews, the device offered a rare glimpse into the inner workings of upper management. Among the documents was a spreadsheet ranking employees based on perceived value to the company, a metric that seemed suspiciously aligned with race and gender biases. White men consistently scored higher than their female or minority counterparts even when objective data suggested otherwise. Though tempted to confront the executives responsible, Alexandra knew patience was key. Acting too soon could jeopardize her investigation and put her cover at risk. Instead, she copied the relevant information onto her phone and returned the USB to its original location, ensuring no one suspected foul play. Her resolve strengthened, further after an encounter with Jamal, the graphic designer who had thanked her earlier for cleaning his workspace. One night, as Alexandra dusted the shelves in his cubicle, Jamal approached her with a hesitant smile. "Hey, Tasha," he said, softly, "can I ask you something?" Surprised, Alexandra nodded. "Sure. What's up?" Jamal hesitated before speaking. "Do you ever feel unseen? Like people look right through you, like you're not really there?" His question caught her off guard. For a moment she considered, revealing her true identity, explaining that she understood exactly how he felt. But she stopped herself, knowing it wasn't the right time. Instead, she offered him a reassuring smile. "Yeah, I know what that feels like," she replied honestly. "But sometimes being unseen gives you a chance to see things others miss. That's powerful." Jamal looked thoughtful for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Thanks, Tasha. You're pretty wise for a janitor." Alexandra chuckled softly, though her heart ached at the irony of his words. Wise, yes, but not just a janitor. Beneath the scrubs and glasses lay a woman determined to expose the cracks in a system she loved, hoping to rebuild it stronger and fairer. By the end of her third week, Alexandra's notebook was filled with observations, anecdotes, and pieces of evidence that painted a complex portrait of Carter Tech. Some employees shone brightly, embodying the ideals her father had fought so hard to instill. Others cast long shadows, perpetuating cycles of bias and exclusion that threatened to undermine everything the company stood for. As she reviewed her findings late one night, sitting alone in a dimly lit break room, Alexandra realized she was standing at a crossroads. The decisions she made next would ripple through the lives of hundreds, if not thousands, of people. She thought about her father, whose unwavering belief in equality had inspired her to take this leap of faith. She thought about Maria, Raj, Jamal, and all the others who worked tirelessly behind the scenes, often overlooked but never unimportant. And she thought about herself, the daughter of a trailblazer now poised to blaze her own path. With a deep breath, Alexandra closed her notebook and tucked it safely into her bag. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new discoveries, and perhaps even new allies. But one thing was certain: she wouldn't stop until justice prevailed. As Alexandra entered her fourth week undercover, the weight of her discoveries pressed heavily on her shoulders. She had seen enough to know that Carter Tech was a company divided, a place where some employees thrived in an inclusive environment, while others suffered silently under the shadow of prejudice and entitlement. Her notebook brimmed with evidence, but it wasn't just facts and figures anymore. It was people's stories, their struggles, and their hopes. Every name she jotted down represented someone whose life could be impacted by her actions, or lack thereof. One evening, as she cleaned the executive suite, Alexandra overheard yet another conversation that sent chills down her spine. Two senior managers were discussing upcoming promotions, casually dismissing qualified candidates based on criteria that had nothing to do with merit. Sophia is talented, sure, one of them said, referring to the Latina woman Alexandra had met earlier, but we can't afford to promote her right now. It'll look like we're favoring diversity over experience. The other manager nodded in agreement. Exactly. Let's wait until next quarter when the optics are better. There, word stung. Alexandra clenched her fists as she scrubbed the floor nearby, forcing herself to remain calm. How could they speak so callously about someone's career aspirations? Sophia wasn't just a statistic or a checkbox for diversity quotas. She was a hard-working professional who deserved recognition for her contributions. Alexandra made a mental note to document this exchange carefully, knowing it would serve as crucial proof of systemic bias. Later that night, Alexandra found herself reflecting on the duality of human nature. Some employees at Carter Tech went out of their way to treat everyone with kindness and respect, regardless of their role or background. A young receptionist named Clara, for instance, always greeted the cleaning staff warmly, offering snacks from her desk drawer during late-night shifts. "You guys work just as hard as anyone else here," she'd say with a smile. "We're all part of the same team." Moments like these reminded Alexandra that empathy still existed within the company walls, but it often felt overshadowed by negativity. On the flip side, there were individuals whose behavior bordered on outright hostility. One particularly unpleasant encounter occurred when Alexandra was tasked with cleaning the legal department's offices. An older male attorney named Mr. Grayson stopped her mid-task, his tone dripping with condescension. "Excuse me, you missed a spot under my desk," he barked, pointing accusingly at a speck of dust barely visible to the naked eye. Before she could respond, he added, "And make sure you don't touch any of my files. People like you shouldn't be handling sensitive information anyway." The comment hit Alexandra like a slap across the face. For a split second, she considered dropping her mop and walking away, but she bit her tongue, reminding herself of her mission. Instead, she forced a polite smile and replied, "I'll take care of it right away, sir." Once he left the room, she allowed herself a moment of quiet anger, wiping away tears that threatened to spill. Words like his weren't just hurtful. They reinforced harmful stereotypes and perpetuated cycles of discrimination. Despite these setbacks, Alexandra refused to let cynicism take root. She clung to the belief that change was possible, even if it required dismantling deeply ingrained systems of inequality. To stay motivated, she sought solace in small victories. For example, after noticing how frequently Jamal, the graphic designer, expressed gratitude toward the cleaning crew, Alexandra decided to test whether such gestures could inspire others. During one shift, she left handwritten thank you notes on desks belonging to employees known for their kindness. The messages were simple: "Thanks for making our jobs easier," or "Your positivity brightens our nights." Though unsigned, they carried a message of appreciation that resonated deeply. To her delight, the notes sparked a ripple effect. Several recipients responded by leaving encouraging messages of their own, thanking the cleaners for their hard work and acknowledging their importance to the company's success. Even Priya, the intern who had befriended Alexandra early on, joined in, taping a cheerful drawing of a mop-wielding superhero above her cubicle. These small acts of goodwill warmed Alexandra's heart, proving that compassion was contagious and powerful. Still, not everyone reacted positively. Some employees dismissed the notes as gimmicky or insincere, rolling their eyes and muttering sarcastic remarks. Others ignored them entirely, continuing to treat the cleaning staff with indifference. But Alexandra didn't expect immediate transformation. She understood that shifting workplace culture took time and consistent effort. What mattered most was planting seeds of change, however small, and trusting they would grow over time. Her resolve strengthened further when she uncovered another layer of corruption within the company. While cleaning a rarely used boardroom, Alexandra spotted a stack of discarded documents marked confidential, lying haphazardly on a table. Flipping through them cautiously, she discovered detailed plans for outsourcing several departments to cut costs, a move that would result in mass layoffs among lower-level employees. Worse still, the proposal included clauses designed to circumvent labor laws, ensuring minimal severance pay for those affected. Alexandra's hands trembled as she read through the pages. This wasn't just unethical. It was illegal. Employees who had dedicated years of their lives to Carter Tech would be cast aside without warning or fair compensation, all in the name of profit. She snapped photos of the documents, careful to capture every detail before returning them to their original location. As she did so, a mix of emotions swirled inside her: outrage, sadness, and determination. She couldn't let this happen. Not on her watch. With each passing day, Alexandra grew more confident in her ability to navigate the complexities of undercover work. She learned to anticipate which employees might reveal damaging information during unguarded moments and positioned herself strategically to overhear conversations. For instance, she timed her bathroom cleaning schedule to coincide with breaks taken by key executives, knowing they were more likely to let their guards down in private settings. Similarly, she paid close attention to body language and tone, picking up on subtle cues that hinted at underlying tensions or conflicts. One such opportunity arose when she overheard a tense argument between Rachel, the marketing director, and one of her subordinates. The disagreement stemmed from a botched campaign launch, with Rachel blaming her team for poor execution, despite clear signs of mismanagement on her part. "If you can't handle the pressure," she hissed, "maybe this isn't the right job for you." Her subordinate, visibly shaken, muttered an apology before retreating to his desk. Alexandra observed the aftermath closely, noting how Rachel's leadership style fostered fear rather than collaboration. Team members tiptoed around her, avoiding eye contact and speaking only when necessary. Morale plummeted as creativity stifled under the weight of constant scrutiny. It was a textbook example of toxic leadership, and one Alexandra intended to address head-on. By the end of her 4th week, Alexandra had amassed a wealth of evidence documenting both positive and negative behaviors across various levels of the organization. She categorized her findings into 3 main groups: employees who consistently demonstrated integrity and inclusivity, the allies, those whose actions betrayed hypocrisy or prejudice, the culprits, and those whose behavior fell somewhere in between, the undecided. Each category provided valuable insights into the cultural dynamics shaping Carter Tech's future. But gathering evidence was only half the battle. Now came the harder part: deciding what to do with it. Alexandra knew she couldn't tackle this alone. If her father was going to implement meaningful change, he needed to hear the truth directly from her and see the proof firsthand. Yet revealing her identity posed risks. Would her co-workers feel betrayed once they realized she had been spying on them? Could she trust her father to act decisively without jeopardizing her safety? These questions weighed heavily on her mind as she prepared for her final days undercover. Despite the uncertainty, one thing remained clear. Alexandra was no longer just the CEO's daughter hiding behind a mop bucket. She was a catalyst for change, armed with knowledge and driven by purpose. And though the road ahead promised challenges, she was ready to face them head-on, for the sake of everyone counting on Carter Tech to live up to its ideals. By the time Alexandra reached her 5th week undercover, she had become a master of blending into the background while observing the intricate web of relationships and behaviors that defined Carter Tech. Her days as Tasha Johnson were numbered, but the weight of what she had uncovered grew heavier with each passing night. She knew it was only a matter of time before she revealed her true identity, and when she did, there would be no turning back. The decisions she made now would ripple through the company, affecting not just her father's legacy but also the lives of every employee who walked through its doors. One evening, as Alexandra worked late in the finance department, she stumbled upon yet another disturbing revelation. A senior accountant named Mr. Peterson was berating one of his junior colleagues, Sarah, for making a minor error in a report. "How hard is it to double-check your numbers?" he snapped, slamming the file onto her desk. "I don't have time to babysit you. Maybe this job is too much for someone like you." "Someone like me?" Sarah repeated, her voice trembling. "What do you mean by that?" Mr. Peterson smirked, leaning closer. "You know exactly what I mean. You're young, inexperienced, and frankly, out of your depth here. Stick to simpler tasks next time." Alexandra watched from the corner of the room, pretending to dust a shelf as tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. It wasn't just the harsh words that stung. It was the implication behind them. "Someone like you." Those 4 words carried layers of bias, dismissing Sarah's potential based on assumptions about her age, gender, or perceived competence. For a moment, Alexandra wanted to march over and confront Mr. Peterson herself, but she caught herself, remembering her role. Instead, she quietly documented the incident, ensuring every detail was recorded. This encounter stayed with her long after she left the office that night. As she walked home under the dim glow of streetlights, Alexandra replayed the scene in her mind, wondering how many others like Sarah had been crushed beneath the weight of such condescending remarks. How many talented individuals had given up pursuing their dreams because they felt unwelcome or underestimated? These questions gnawed at her conscience, fueling her determination to expose the truth. The following night brought a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. While cleaning the creative department, Alexandra overheard a heartfelt conversation between 2 designers, Elena and Kevin, discussing ways to improve collaboration within their team. "We should start holding regular brainstorming sessions," Elena suggested enthusiastically. "Not just for senior members, but for everyone. Fresh perspectives can lead to amazing ideas." Kevin nodded in agreement. "Yeah, and we could rotate leadership roles for different projects. That way, more people get a chance to shine." Their enthusiasm was contagious, spreading warmth even to Alexandra as she wiped down nearby desks. Here were 2 employees actively seeking solutions to foster inclusivity and innovation, qualities that should have been celebrated across the entire company. Inspired by their initiative, Alexandra decided to include their suggestions in her final report, highlighting them as examples of grassroots efforts that could inspire broader change. However, not all interactions were so uplifting. Later that week, Alexandra witnessed an incident that tested her patience and resolve. While mopping the floor near the executive offices, she saw Rachel, the same marketing director infamous for her toxic leadership style, publicly humiliate one of her team members during a presentation rehearsal. The victim, a soft-spoken intern, named Daniel, stumbled over his words while explaining a campaign strategy. Before he could recover, Rachel cut him off mid-sentence. "This is why I told you not to waste our time," she sneered, crossing her arms. "If you can't articulate your ideas clearly, maybe you shouldn't bother presenting them at all." Daniel, flushed red, clutching his notes tightly as silence filled the room. None of his teammates stepped forward to defend him. Instead, they avoided eye contact, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Alexandra felt a surge of anger bubbling inside her chest. This wasn't constructive criticism. It was cruelty disguised as feedback. And worse, it was happening in front of peers, stripping Daniel of his confidence and dignity. Unable to remain silent any longer, Alexandra took a calculated risk. After finishing her shift, she approached Daniel discreetly in the hallway. Still dressed as Tasha, she offered him a kind smile. "Hey, I heard what happened earlier. Don't let her get to you, okay? You're doing great work." Startled, Daniel looked up, unsure whether to trust this stranger. But something in Alexandra's tone reassured him. "Thanks," he murmured softly. "It's just hard sometimes, you know, feeling like you're not good enough." "I know," Alexandra replied earnestly. "But don't let anyone make you doubt yourself. Keep pushing forward, you've got this." Though brief, the exchange left a lasting impression on both of them. For Daniel, it was a rare moment of encouragement amid overwhelming negativity. For Alexandra, it reinforced the importance of standing up for those who couldn't, or wouldn't stand up for themselves. As her final days undercover approached, Alexandra began compiling her findings into a comprehensive report. Sitting alone in her apartment late at night, she sifted through pages of notes, photographs, and observations, organizing them into clear categories: evidence of discriminatory behavior, examples of positive leadership, and actionable recommendations for improvement. Each entry represented countless hours of hard work, emotional labor, and moments of self-doubt. One section of the report focused specifically on the executives implicated in undermining her father's diversity initiatives. Using the screenshots she'd taken of incriminating emails and documents, Alexandra built a damning case against them, detailing how their actions contradicted Carter Tech's stated values. Another section highlighted systemic issues within departments like marketing and finance, where toxic leaders perpetuated cycles of fear and exclusion. Finally, she included success stories, employees like Jamal, Clara, Elena, and Kevin, who embodied the inclusive spirit Marcus Carter had envisioned for his company. With the report nearly complete, Alexandra faced her biggest challenge yet: deciding how to present it. Revealing her true identity meant risking backlash, not just from the employees she'd exposed, but potentially from her father as well. What if he didn't believe her? Or worse, what if he chose to protect the status quo rather than confront uncomfortable truths? These fears lingered in the back of her mind, threatening to derail her confidence. Determined not to let anxiety paralyze her, Alexandra sought advice from an unlikely source: Maria, one of her fellow cleaners. During a quiet moment between shifts, she confided in Maria about her mission, omitting specific details but sharing enough to convey the gravity of her situation. To her surprise, Maria listened intently, offering words of wisdom that resonated deeply. "You've already done the hardest part," Maria said gently. "You've seen things others refuse to see, and you've found the courage to speak up. Trust yourself, Tasha, or whoever you really are. If your heart tells you this is the right thing to do, then follow it. People may not understand at first, but eventually they'll see the truth." Her words struck a chord within Alexandra, reminding her why she had started this journey in the first place. This wasn't about revenge or personal gain. It was about justice, fairness, and creating a workplace where everyone could thrive. With renewed resolve, Alexandra finalized her report and prepared for the confrontation ahead. On her penultimate night as Tasha, Alexandra experienced one last defining moment. While cleaning the lobby, she encountered Raj, the cleaner who had shared stories about his teenage son struggling with schoolwork. He greeted her warmly, handing her a thermos of chai tea he'd brewed earlier. "For you," he said with a grin. "Thought you could use something warm after all this hard work." Touched by his kindness, Alexandra accepted the gesture, sipping the fragrant liquid gratefully. "Thank you, Raj," she said softly. "You always brighten my nights." Raj chuckled modestly. "We take care of each other around here, don't we?" His simple statement carried profound meaning. In a world often divided by titles, hierarchies, and biases, acts of kindness transcended boundaries, fostering connections that mattered most. As Alexandra walked away, she realized that this was the essence of what Carter Tech needed to embrace: a culture rooted in mutual respect, empathy, and support. The next morning, Alexandra sat nervously in her father's office, clutching her report tightly. Marcus looked up from his desk, surprised to see his daughter dressed in casual clothes instead of her usual business attire. "Lexi?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "What brings you here so early?" Taking a deep breath, Alexandra placed the folder in front of him. "Dad, I need to show you something. Something important." For a moment, Marcus hesitated, sensing the seriousness in her tone. Then, nodding slowly, he opened the folder and began reading. As page after page unfolded, before him his expression shifted from curiosity to shock and finally to pride. When he finished, he looked up at Alexandra, his eyes filled with admiration. "You've done incredible work, Lexi," he said quietly. "But are you ready for what comes next?" Alexandra squared her shoulders, meeting his gaze steadily. "Yes," she replied without hesitation, "because this isn't just about us anymore. It's about everyone who deserves better." The day Alexandra revealed her findings to her father marked the beginning of a whirlwind of change at Carter Tech. Marcus Carter, though initially shocked by his daughter's undercover operation, quickly realized the gravity of what she had uncovered. Sitting in his office, surrounded by stacks of reports and photographs documenting systemic biases, nepotism, and outright hostility, he felt a mix of emotions: anger, disappointment, but also pride. His little girl hadn't just exposed flaws in the company. She had shown courage and conviction that mirrored his own struggles as a black man climbing the corporate ladder decades ago. "Lexi," Marcus said finally, breaking the silence. "What you've done here is remarkable, but it's going to shake this company to its core." Alexandra nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I know, Dad. That's why I did it. We can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not. People are suffering because of hypocrisy and prejudice, and if we don't fix it now, nothing will ever change." Her words struck a chord with Marcus. He knew better than anyone how fragile workplace dynamics could be, especially in an industry where diversity initiatives often faced resistance from those clinging to outdated ideals. Yet he also understood the risks involved. Firing high-ranking executives or restructuring departments would send shockwaves throughout the organization, potentially alienating longtime allies and investors. Still, looking into his daughter's determined eyes, he realized there was no turning back. If Carter Tech stood for anything, it was integrity, and that meant holding everyone accountable, no matter their position. Over the next few days, Marcus called an emergency meeting with the HR department and senior leadership team. Alexandra joined him, dressed in professional attire once again, ready to present her evidence. As they entered the conference room, whispers rippled through the crowd. Employees exchanged puzzled glances, unsure why the CEO's daughter had suddenly reappeared after weeks of absence. Some speculated about layoffs or mergers. Others guessed it might involve scandalous rumors circulating among staff. None suspected the bombshell about to drop. Marcus opened the meeting with a somber tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming on such short notice. Today, my daughter, Alexandra, has something important to share with all of us. Please, listen carefully. It concerns the future of this company." With that, Alexandra stepped forward, her heart pounding but her voice steady. She began by explaining her decision to go undercover, emphasizing that her goal wasn't to spy or punish, but to understand the reality employees faced every day. Then, using anonymized examples and documented evidence, she laid bare the truths she'd uncovered: discriminatory remarks made behind closed doors, deliberate sabotage of diversity initiatives, and blatant disrespect toward lower-level workers. Each revelation landed like a punch, leaving some attendees visibly shaken while others squirmed uncomfortably in their seats. When she reached the section detailing the email scandal involving top executives, gasps echoed through the room. Alexandra projected screenshots onto the screen, highlighting phrases like pandering to political correctness and too soft. The air grew thick with tension as she concluded, "These emails prove that certain individuals have actively worked against the values this company claims to uphold. They've betrayed your trust, my father's vision, and most importantly, the hard-working people who make Carter Tech successful." By the time she finished speaking, the room was eerily silent. Marcus stood up, his expression stern yet resolute. "Effective immediately," he announced. "Several members of our executive team will be terminated due to their actions undermining this company's mission. Additionally, we will launch a full investigation into other departments to ensure accountability across the board." The announcement sent ripples of disbelief and relief through the audience. Some clapped quietly, grateful that justice was being served, while others whispered anxiously about what this meant for their own roles. For Alexandra, however, the work was far from over. While firing toxic leaders was a crucial first step, true transformation required more than removing bad apples. It demanded rebuilding the entire culture. In the weeks that followed, Alexandra took charge of implementing sweeping reforms designed to address the root causes of inequality and exclusion within Carter Tech. Drawing from her experiences as Tasha, she introduced mandatory empathy training programs for all employees, regardless of rank. These workshops focused on fostering mutual respect, active listening, and conflict resolution skills. To encourage transparency, she established anonymous feedback channels where workers could voice concerns without fear of retaliation. And perhaps most significantly, she created mentorship opportunities pairing junior employees with senior leaders committed to nurturing talent rather than stifling it. One of her proudest initiatives was the launch of a gratitude wall in Sci-Fi, the main lobby. Inspired by the handwritten notes she'd left during her undercover stint, the wall invited employees to publicly acknowledge acts of kindness and teamwork. Within days, it became a vibrant tapestry of positivity, covered in colorful sticky notes celebrating colleagues' contributions. From Clara thanking the cleaning crew for their dedication to Jamal praising Priya for her innovative ideas. The wall served as a daily reminder that small gestures could spark big changes. Not everyone welcomed these reforms with open arms. Some mid-level managers resisted new policies, arguing they were unnecessary distractions from productivity. Others grumbled privately about feeling policed by increased oversight. But Alexandra remained undeterred, knowing that progress rarely came without pushback. She held town hall meetings to address concerns, inviting employees to share their thoughts openly. Slowly but surely, skeptics began to see the benefits of a more inclusive workplace, higher morale, stronger collaboration, and improved performance. Metrics spoke louder than any argument against change. Meanwhile, Alexandra continued reaching out to individuals she'd connected with during her undercover mission. She met with Sarah, the junior accountant humiliated by Mr. Peterson, offering her support and encouraging her to pursue leadership roles within the finance department. She checked in regularly with Daniel, the intern berated by Rachel, helping him rebuild his confidence and guiding him through challenging projects. And she stayed close to Maria, Raj, and the rest of the cleaning crew, ensuring they felt valued and respected moving forward. As months passed, the impact of Alexandra's efforts became undeniable. Morale soared as employees embraced the new culture of inclusivity and accountability. Departments once plagued by toxicity flourished under fresh leadership, with team members collaborating seamlessly instead of competing bitterly. Even clients noticed the shift, praising Carter Tech for its renewed focus on innovation and customer satisfaction. For Alexandra, the journey transformed her in ways she never anticipated. Once unsure of her place in the world, she now stood firmly rooted in her identity as a changemaker. Her experience as Tasha taught her the power of humility, resilience, and perspective, lessons she carried with her into her new role as Chief Culture Officer at Carter Tech. Together with her father, she vowed to continue championing equality and fairness, proving that true leadership wasn't about wielding authority, but empowering others to thrive. On the one-year anniversary of her undercover mission, Alexandra stood before a packed auditorium filled with Carter Tech employees. Dressed in a bold red blazer, she reflected on the challenges and triumphs of the past year. "When I started this journey," she began, her voice resonating with conviction, "I didn't know what to expect. All I knew was that something felt wrong, and that I couldn't stay silent. What I discovered changed me forever, but it also gave me hope. Because despite the negativity we faced, I saw countless examples of kindness, courage, and determination. Those moments reminded me that people are capable of incredible things when given the chance." She paused, scanning the sea of faces before her. Many nodded in agreement, their expressions reflecting gratitude and solidarity. "Today," she continued, "we celebrate how far we've come, but we must also remember that this is just the beginning. Building a truly inclusive workplace takes constant effort, honesty, and heart. So let's keep pushing forward, together." The US room erupted in applause, echoing off the walls like a promise fulfilled. As Alexandra stepped down from the stage, she caught sight of Maria giving her a thumbs up from the back row. Nearby, Jamal grinned widely, holding up a sign that read, "We're proud of you, Lexi." Tears welled up in her eyes, but this time they weren't born of frustration or anger. They stemmed from joy, pride, and the knowledge that she had made a difference. And so, Alexandra Carter, the CEO's daughter turned undercover cleaner, proved that sometimes the greatest revolutions start with the smallest steps. By choosing to see the unseen, hear the unheard, and fight for the overlooked, She reshaped not only a company, but also the lives of everyone within it. In doing so, she honored her father's legacy while forging one uniquely her own, a testament to the enduring power of empathy, integrity, and unwavering belief in a better tomorrow.